You said physical, you said emotional, and you said mentally.
Yes.
And let's unpack that. How was he physical with you? How was he physically abusive towards you in that period before you escaped him?
He thought that I was telling on him or cheating on him or trying to kill him.
Okay. And how was he physical with you in those interactions?
He wanted me to tell him who I was cheating on him with or if I was working with the cops, and I kept saying that I didn't, and he kept hitting me anyway, and then I started telling him that I did, even though I wasn't, and he still kept hitting me anyway.
And let's talk about that. Why would you tell him that you were doing these things, working with the police, why would you tell him that, even though you weren't at the time?
So that I wouldn't get hit.
Did he still hit you?
Yes.
You said that he was emotionally abusive to you. Tell the jurors about that.
Because he'd go back and forth with telling me to tell him that I was working with the cops, and he would accuse me of sleeping with the guy downstairs, sleeping with all these different people, that I came out of the window one night. I couldn't take care of the kids. He wouldn't let me do anything without him being there.
You said that he was mentally abusive to you. Can you tell the jurors how?
By asking me if I was working with the cops and making sure that I stuck with the story that he brought me to work and dropped me off and was bringing Harmony to her mom.
And can you tell us who came up with that story?
He did, Adam.
And you stuck to it.
Yeah.
You stuck to it even though you knew you weren't working at the time. I'll rephrase. Did you stick to it even though you knew you weren't working at the time?
Yes.
Attorney Smith asked you about Adam being pure evil. Did you think that Adam was pure evil?
When he would start going crazy, yeah.
And you mentioned the evil eyes. When he looked at you in that moment. Evil eyes. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And was that right after he'd beaten Harmony?
Yeah, it just got worse.
Were there also good times with the defendant in that period?
Yeah. But it was mostly bad.
And in those bad times, were you hoping for the good times?
Yeah.
Kayla, do you still love the defendant?
I still care about him. Because he's the father of my children. He was my best friend. It's been hard for me to just let go.
Kayla, I want to switch gears with you just a bit. You mentioned that after the defendant had beaten Harmony to death, after your car died at that intersection, after the defendant realized that Harmony was dead, that he got a duffel bag out of the trunk. And Attorney Smith asked you about him getting that duffel bag out of the trunk. And you said that the trunk would not open.
Yeah.
And he had to go in through the back seats.
Yeah.
Can you tell the jurors why the trunk wouldn't open?
When the car died, nothing was electronic was working. The windows wouldn't go down. The car just stopped working.
Kayla, I'm going to switch gears with you again. And I'm sorry to bounce around like this, but you talked about Mr. Badero, Anthony Badero, being a source of drugs, an occasional source of drugs.
Yes.
And Attorney Smith asked you about how these drugs would be purchased.
Yes.
And I believe the testimony that she asked you about was that sometimes you'd pay for them, sometimes he'd give them to you for free. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
Would Mr. Berdero also accept food stamps or SNAP as a form of payment for drugs?
Yes.
And when you were living in the car, is that a form of payment that he accepted?
Yes.
Did that lead to your family having to eat baby food as a result?
Yes.
Who was eating baby food while you were living in that car?
All of us. Myself and the boys. And Harmony.
Attorney Smith asked you about trying to keep things quiet in the parking lot of the Colonial Village Apartments that morning around 3 a.m. when you woke up and the defendant was beating Harmony, striking her blow after blow. And you talked about the children not screaming. Is that because at the same time he was telling them to shut the fuck up? I think that was your testimony on direct.
Yes.
Who was he telling to shut the fuck up?
Harmony.
And was that before, during, or after he was brutally beating her?
Before and after.
Attorney Smith asked you several questions about Harmony, the changes that were happening to her. And she said that it was difficult for Harmony because of all the changes. And you agreed with that, but I want to ask you about that. Was it difficult for Harmony because of all the changes that she was going through?
Objection. I just by the board. Why don't you finish the question and then I'll rule on the objection.
So, Kayla, was it difficult for Harmony because of all the changes she was going through, or because she was terrified of the defendant?
Sustained. You may rephrase the question.
Kayla, was it difficult for Harmony because of her fear of the defendant?
Objection.
It's a direct question. It's not a leading
Approach.
question. So, Kayla, was Harmony, was it because of all of these changes, or was it for some other reason?
Overruled.
Or was it for some other reason?
I think it was all of it.
And let's talk about all of it. Can you tell the jurors what all of it is?
Adam being abusive, physically and mentally, and everything she went through from her mom and her dad.
And Kayla, when you say Adam being abusive, you're talking about the accidents that you would have.
Yes.
During your cross-examination, this was last week, the defense attorney said during her examination of you that Harmony died in the car with you, right? And you weren't able to explain the answer that you'd given. Who else was in the car with you, with Harmony, when Harmony died?
Adam and the two boys.
And who was striking her repeatedly right before she died?
Adam.
Are you aware that the defense argued in their opening that something happened to Harmony in the middle of the night, and that thing killed her before the defendant was even around?
Right.
So, is that true?
No.
Did Harmony die in the middle of the night alone with you when the defendant wasn't even there?
No.
So when you testified during the defendant's examination that you thought Harmony was sleeping but then found out she was dead,
Yes.
was that in the middle of the night, or was that the next day after your car broke down?
That was the next day.
That was after the methadone clinic.
Yes.
Kayla, you were just asked, so you were asked last Friday, about a letter that you'd written with various demands. Do you remember that? It's the defense exhibit G.
Yes.
In that letter, you discuss betraying the defendant, and the attorney asked you if you wrote betraying, but you weren't asked to explain what betraying meant. Can you tell the jurors what you meant when you said betraying?
I felt like I was betraying him, Adam, by telling what happened to Harmony. And I was fighting with myself. Because I didn't want him to be mad at me for doing the right thing.
Were you referring to the secret that you'd been keeping for 2 years?
Yes.
Were you referring to telling the truth about him beating Harmony to death? I'll strike that question, Judge. Last week, you were asked to describe a conversation that you had with the defendant where he agreed to take the fall for Harmony's death, but you weren't asked to explain what that meant. What did you mean when you said take the fall, or when he said take the fall?
That he wants me with the children, and no matter what happens, he's the one at fault.
Was he taking the fall for something that you did?
No.
Did you beat Harmony to death?
No.
Was he taking the fall for what he had done?
Yes.
You said that in the spring of 2020, the defendant was acting strange. He was accusing you of telling on him for what he'd done to Harmony. What did you mean when you said he was acting strange?
Every time we got high, as soon as he got high, he started freaking out and just accused me of working with the cops, thought there was cameras in the house, the TV, smashed every phone we had, just destroyed the whole apartment.
When you were asked about lying to the grand jury, you said that he was stuck in your head. What did you mean by that?
That I stick with the story that he told me to say.
And that was stuck in your head during your testimony.
Yes.
I want to talk about that list of items that you gave, your requirements, the things that you'd like before testifying. Did you get immunity?
No.
Where are you currently living, Kayla?
New Hampshire State Prison for Women.
Kayla, did you get to keep your children?
No.
Do you have any rights to them?
No.
Are you even allowed to speak to them right now, Kayla?
No.
You said that after the defendant repeatedly struck Harmony, after he put the blanket over her, after she moaned, after the strange crying, moaning stopped, after he did drugs, and after the car died, you thought that Harmony was asleep under that blanket.
Yes.
Why did you think that she may be sleeping after Adam repeatedly struck her?
Because she usually just goes to sleep after.
Kayla, why stay with someone? Why stay with someone that does this to you?
Because I was scared. And I still cared about him.
Why defend a person that does this to you?
Because I was scared what would happen. I didn't want anybody getting in trouble.
Why stay with someone? Why stay with someone that does what he did to a helpless girl like this?
Because for some reason I still cared about him.
Why defend someone that beat her to death?
I don't know. I was scared.
Attorney Smith asked you about a proffer agreement, your agreement to provide information about what the defendant had done, what had happened to Harmony. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
And she asked you about how none of those statements could be used against you. And I think you
Yes.
agreed with that.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you, Kayla, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 102 for identification, and I'm just going to ask that you review that document and look up when you're ready. Kayla, is that the agreement as you remember it?
Yes.
And do you recognize any of the signatures on that final page?
Yes.
Which one do you recognize?
Mine and my attorney and the AG.
Is that the true and correct agreement?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I move to admit states, what's marked for identification as states 102.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the ID may be stricken and be entered as a full exhibit.
I'm going to take it back. Kayla, does that agreement discuss how your statements can be used against you?
Yes.
Tell the jurors how your statements can be used against you.
If I lie.
Does it say what other than your statements can be used against you if you lie?
I could get charged with anything.